Okay, Road Hogger here again. This is like a part two in the Fort Defiance area. I'm just sort of having all these reminiscing things going on. And in the last one, I talked about uh, the GM plant and all, but there was some other kind of weird things about this town back in those days because they ran three shifts. I mean, if there weren't 1,000, 1,500 people working there, I don't know what, but that place was pretty darn busy. And talking to folks nowadays, it's not as busy. It's actually not even the number one employer here in the town and the area as it was back then. Um, but working for the sheet metal contractor, it's like we worked like first shift, and then sometimes we had to work third shift because they weren't running as hard. So we were able to get in there and do the things that we needed to do in the plant. And the third shift thing was really interesting because we were hanging out with the union sheet metal workers and the UAW guys, and when they get off of work, it was like 5, 6 in the morning, and they headed off to what they called these working man bars. But back in those days, you could get a Jack and Coke for like $1.50, and they would be like $2.50, $3 everywhere else. They're 6 now, 6 or 8, depending if they have a pour charge or not. And then there was another place that was like a go-go strip bar, and they had girls in there working that early in the morning, and the guys would come in and they were having like supper, because that would be like their supper time, getting off of work. Like if you got off of work at 5, you'd be having supper. This is like 5 a.m., you'd be having supper in the morning. And I mean, you could get eggs and stuff too, but it's kind of funny. You're sitting there and you're eating, and there's girls like in your face grinding and stuff, and guys are tucking bucks and stuff. And that was pretty wild. I mean, I was pretty young guy back then. I mean, what, in my early 20s? I mean, probably 22 or so. And there was another bar that was here in town that was even stranger considering the time period, and it was we went there a bunch, but we only kind of went on certain nights, and I was kind of wondering what that was all about. And it turns out that the bar was actually, they had reached some sort of gentleman's agreement, and the bar was Caucasian 3 days a week, and the bar was African American 3 days a week. And they had a new hire, this kid, I forget what his name was. He was pretty funny though. It was like, shut up, Toady, maybe you'll learn a thing or two, which was told to me when I was like working for him, and I was like, well, before drinking age, I think I just turned 20, and they actually, back as a backup time, it's like when I turned 21 back in Indianapolis, we went out bar hopping for lunch, and they got me smashed really bad. I threw me in my car, waited until quitting time for me to sleep it off, and my first wife at the time, she was so mad when they brought me home. I was like so wasted. But forward now. So I was mentoring this kid, which is relative because I was practically a kid too, but he was pretty young. I think he was like 18 or something like that. He never worked at what we do. He's like fresh out of high school. He had a little bit of drafting experience, but he goes, I think the drinking age then was 18 or something like that, so he could have a beer. But we went to this bar, and he went through the door, and I was like right behind him, and I stopped at the door, and he went over and grabbed the table and sat down, and I stood at the door, and I looked around, and it's like, oh, what's different about this place? And I go, so I sat at the table with him, and we sat there for a few minutes, and it was like an E.F. Hutton moment, because like almost the music stopped, everybody stopped talking, they all staring at us and stuff. And I looked at him and I said, do you notice something different about the bar tonight? And he goes, and this is how colorblind we are from living in Indianapolis, whatever. But I wasn't totally colorblind. I go, hey, do you notice something different about the place? And he goes, no, what? And I go, like, we're the only light-skinned looking people here. And it's like, I was almost ready to pull that Tonto moment and say, What do you mean, we white man? Being half Japanese and all. But I says, nobody's coming to service. They're all staring at us. Nobody's talking anymore. I said, I think we should probably leave while we still can leave on 2 feet. And but nobody messed with us or anything. They just knew we were probably out of town stupid contractors, didn't know what the rules were or whatever. So we hightailed it out of there and went, I don't know, some other bar downtown, which hardly any of them exist. I was downtown today, and there's a lounge there, and it's Monday. It's closed. It's like, what? So that was kind of weird. But there's like 1,001 stories. I mean, you get a lot of them over 10 years being here and stuff. Like those sheet metal worker guys, golly, practically all of them were married. And so they were hitting hard on the town folk. It was like, lock up your daughters, dude. It's like the contractors here in town. And, you know, they were making big bucks, and they were spreading it around. It didn't take a week to break a bar before they knew who you were, and it was like going to Cheers or something. You went through the door, and they knew what beer you drank or what drink you drank. And the girls are like, oh, maybe I can marry this guy and move to the big city. And in actually, one guy did marry a girl from this town. They went back to Indianapolis, but the rest of them, man, there was so much catting around, going around, and there was several instances where the wives back home found out about it, drove up here, and there was I witnessed like 3-4 scenes at bars and restaurants where the wife broke in and saw the husband canoodling with some town girl, and there was like hell to pay. I mean, I think there was several divorces that happened after that, but if they didn't get a divorce when they got back to town, I'm sure that they had to buy their wives some like pretty high dollar presents to make up for their infidelities and all. Yeah, it was quite a time in my life. I mean, there was another story. It was so funny. Was the mother of my children was actually taking care of all of our finances, which she always did, because I still traveled quite a bit when I was out. So it's like I couldn't be taking care of the bills and stuff like that. But back in those days, they issued you a check, you know, and sealed it up. I don't think anybody looked at them or whatever. But we were working so much overtime here. I mean, it wouldn't be unusual for me to have a 25 hours of overtime in a week and stuff. And she went to pick up my check, and she opened it up, and it was like, I don't want to say it was like $2.95, but it was like way not what she was expecting it to be, because she knew what I was making previously. But it turns out at that time, in the early days, they had this accounting software. I don't know what it was. It wasn't QuickBooks, I don't think, but evidently it had a set point in it for non-union employees, where after it reached a certain dollar amount, it reset to 0 and then started clicking off again. So that's what happened to my paycheck. And they ended up having to go into accounting and then refiguring it all up and cutting her another check, because she goes, I can't wait for another pay period before, you get this amount right. Plus, it's going to be even higher, which means more taxes are going to be taken out. She was pretty on spot with that kind of thing, So they cut her a check for the differential. But yeah, it was like, no, he's been up there, and I know how he's working a lot of hours, so it really should be significantly more than what this check is. And they were like, oh, it's like, because like nobody checked it all, checked the checks, and they printed them out and put them in the envelope and sealed them, and then people came and picked them up. I guess that kind of accounting area would happen today, but you'd find out about when you went to go see your direct deposit, and it's like instead of being $2,000, it's like 200. It'd be like big freak out session. But nowadays they probably just make you wait until the next pay period, and then you go into another bracket and get even more taxes taken out on it. So it's like, yeah. But that was kind of funny. But it's hard for me to even think of all the stories that happened here in this town. But it was so like a small-ish town back in those days. You know, the downtown area looked exactly like it would be like if you drove into here in the 1930s or something. All the building facades were painted in brown, dark shades of brownish and reddish. You know, I mean, subdued tones. Now, gosh, it's all like bright reds, yellows, and then there's some that have like these modern facades that they put up over the old, you know, the old 1920, 1930 building faces. There's no windows or anything on it. It was kind of different. So, but it's all built up here, and I actually didn't take any pictures of it, but I actually drove by the John Mansville plant. There's an aluminum plant here, and I don't know that we actually went there. I think we went there once in the aluminum part, and I think they actually had a fiberglass spinning plant that made batt fiberglass insulation. That was really interesting because that was the early days when they were using water jet cutters to cut that stuff, because you didn't want like fiberglass fibers flying all over the place and you could be breathing them and stuff. So if you used water jet, of course it was like wet suppression, so that kept all that down. And the other plant that did the aluminum smelting, they stopped doing tours there after the second person said, "What's this silvery water?" 'Cause the aluminum was coming down the troughs, and it does radiate a lot of heat because it's molten aluminum, but not like molten steel. And and they put their hands in there, and it's like next thing you know, they vaporized off a few fingers and stuff. That was like, so no more plant tours for that place. You get a little wise after a while working in places like that. It's like molten metals and molten glass, molten steel. Human flesh doesn't resist that very well for very long. It's like, oh yeah, it's like So there's been like other horror stories, like at the plant where the cupola bottom, I guess they didn't reline it with that refractory brick, and there was like a major incident where the bottom fell out, and there were some workers down low, and there was like a scene out of one of that volcano movie where the guy's running, and as he's running, his feet and legs are vaporizing in the molten metal until he falls over into it. And it's really horrible when you think about it, kind of quick. But the ironic part is the metals are actually blended with other different metals to make the type of alloy steel that you need for engine blocks and stuff. So it's not like you can like chunk it all back up and jackhammer or whatever and put it back in the furnace and reheat it, because like number one, it's got human remains in it, and number two, the chemicals in your body totally change the alloy of the metal, and it would cost too much to put the other, you can't put just the other alloys in it to get the other metals and chemicals that are in your body out of that. So they just scrap it for the most part, but they cut a chunk out of it and said, this is him for burial purposes or whatever. I mean, I know you don't even need a casket, I guess. It's like, but you know, it's like that block weighs like a ton. So I hate to laugh about it, but it's kind of a quick way to go, really, kind of horrific, but quick when you think about it, because you fall face first over into a puddle of molten steel, and it's over pretty darn quickly, you know. So it's kind of a morbid thing to be talking about here, but you know what? I've worked at enough industrial plants. There's been, you know, I've been at the scene of some like pretty horrific incidents where you don't have the proper lockout, tag out procedures. You know, it's like back in those days, they really didn't have the thing. It's like you might have one lock on it, on a piece of equipment that could kill somebody. Now you have like 12 of a big like metal piece with holes in it that comes together, and there's all these padlocks on it. It's like everybody has to unlock their lock in order for that machine to be turned on again. So yeah, those are the kinds of things I got to see when I was doing the design stuff for them, and it was quite interesting, quite educational. You know, you get to see the micro dirty jobs part of things. So Anyway, I think that's going to wrap up this part 2 here at the Fort Defiance area with my little reminiscing about my days working here in Defiance, Ohio. So Roadhogger here saying goodbye and God bless. I hate this clicker. This clicker doesn't always work.